listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Hey, good morning, Overwatch League fans, and welcome to your Overwatch League Daily episode for April 4th, 2018, and welcome to Stage 3. We've made it. We're over the halfway point for the inaugural season of Overwatch League. Today, I'm joined by Overwatch League analysts Yiska and Volamel. If you've listened to the show before, you're familiar with them. Both incredibly smart guys, and we talk a ton about the Overwatch League movements that we've been seeing going on between the different rosters. And I'm going to highlight those really quickly. We talk about them more in the interview, so make sure to tune in for that. But I wanted to kind of give everyone a rundown on all the movements that we saw over the past week, because it's been a while since our last Overwatch League Daily episode. So first, former Kongdu Panthera flex tank Void has finally had his contract approved by the League and LA Gladiators, so he's expected to join the team at the beginning of Stage 4. The LA Valiant have traded Unco to the Dallas Fuel in exchange for Custa. We're going to talk more about that because that's a really interesting movement for both teams when you think about it. Then you've got the LA Valiant releasing Envy, their flex tank, from his contract after what was described as creative and competitive differences between the team and Envy and the coaching staff. We also are going to see on Friday CEO Noah Winston, for the LA Valiant and Immortals is going to be doing not an AMA, but kind of a Q&A on the competitive Overwatch subreddit. That's Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific, talking about all these movements because there are a lot of really interesting and maybe counterintuitive movements. You have to let me know what you guys think about those movements in the comments, or send us the email, whatever you decide to do. But among some of those other decisions the organizations have made, the LA Gladiators picked up Silk Thread's contract. So Silk Thread's going to be a Gladiator, and Grim Reality is going to be moving to a coaching role. So he's going from playing to coaching. And last but not least, Bunny has been transferred from the Seoul Dynasty to the LA Valiant. So to recap, the Valiant add Custa from the Fuel and Bunny from the Dynasty. The franchise releases Envy and has transitioned Grim Reality to a coaching role. Silk Thread's contract has been purchased by the Gladiators. The Fuel sign Unco in exchange for Custa, and then Void's contract has been approved by the League. Whew, that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff that has happened. But the trade deadline is now closed, so that should be about all we have going forward. I believe that's the trade and signing deadline. Tonight's schedule is brought to you by patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. If you like the show, in the past 3.5 months, we put out 80 episodes. If you head on over to patreon.com/OWL Daily Show, you can support the show right from there. Thank you all who have supported so far. Tonight's schedule, 4 p.m. Pacific time, we've got the Shanghai Dragons going up against the Dallas Fuel. At 6 p.m. Pacific, Bunny will get to play his former team right away as the LA Valiant look to take on the Seoul Dynasty. And then at 8 p.m. Pacific, the San Francisco Shock will take on the LA Gladiators. Speaking of the Shock, don't miss Friday's episode. I'm going to be joined by both Nomi and Dak. We're going to discuss a wide range of San Francisco Shock topics. And if you've got questions, join our Discord at discord.me/OWL Daily Show and let me know what you'd like me to ask both Dak and Nomi. But that's it. Let's go ahead and jump into my conversation with Yiska and Volamel. All right, I am back. It's been a long time since you've heard Yiska and Volamel on the show. Two episodes it's been. But we've got a lot of movement going on in Overwatch League right now. And surprisingly so, like, you need a spreadsheet to kind of follow it. So we wanted to break down, especially the most important ones, talk about what they mean for the league and for the teams who are gaining and losing players. Volamel, Yiska, first of all, welcome back. Been a while. So let's jump right in then. Let's talk about the Gladiators first. So we've mentioned it earlier in the show, but Void has been signed for the Gladiators. We're awaiting his visa. He's planned to play at stage 2, maybe sooner, depending on how the visa process goes. So that's there. We won't talk about that a whole lot today, but we will talk about kind of a big deal here. That silk thread has been signed from the Valiant. The Gladiators picked up the rest of his contract and is now joining the Gladiators. So, Volamel, I'm going to start with you. What does Yiska bring to the Gladiators right now that they don't already have?
Silk Thread, he does kind of overlap quite a bit with Hydration. They do kind of fill the same role, but I do kind of feel that they're going to be attempting to off roll a little bit, maybe throwing Asher on some interesting picks that are even having Hydration play support when the support line doesn't have a lot of time, or maybe they're just not feeling it. They're a little burnt out because they are just only 2 people and they don't have a substitute to kind of fall back on. That said, you could see, Hydration playing a little bit more of an aggressive Lucio that we've seen on Ilios, especially Ruins. I think he had some pretty sick plays there. But overall, in terms of just pure DPS, he doesn't really add anything. I think he just fills out the roster very nicely and there is a little bit of overlapping, but I think overall it gives them a lot of different tools and a lot of different compositional choices with three incredibly flexible, people to play all kinds of different heroes. So you got Surefour, you got Hydration, now you have Silk Thread. There shouldn't be anything under the sun that these 3 shouldn't be able to play at a high level.
Well, and this is something, too, that the Gladiators are kind of unique in the sense that besides Asher on Tracer, all of these players don't have a single hero over 50% playtime, which is kind of insane, but and also makes it difficult to prepare. You don't know necessarily who you might see on any given map. You've got the flexibility of Hydration. Like you said, you've got Genji and Pharah there, but Silk Thread has the Soldier 76, which kind of overlaps with some of the hit scan abilities of Surefour. Do you think that, Yiska, you might see them play some mind games here in the sense of giving teams a lot of different looks from, 3 players? I consider Asher, I'm just kind of lumping him in as Tracer kind of, but that could obviously change too. But you've got essentially 3 DPS players with a kind of musical chairs of heroes when it comes to their DPS roles. Do you see the Gladiators using that a lot to their advantage here and seeing them switch up those comps a lot?
Yeah, the thing is, for a while now, Overwatch League players have not been like chess figurines, right? Like so for instance, you have the pawns or whatever, and that's the traces or whatever. So they only are pawns. But they actually are now is like, little domino pieces with like a 3 and a 5. And then you slot them however you want them in, right?
I love your analogies.
Yeah, but basically because sometimes you need 2 5s. So for instance, Florida Mayhem plays Tivik on Tracer when Logix goes Widow, right? And we've seen that these flexibilities and even having overlapping picks is actually required. It's not even an obstacle, it's actually required in order to build your roster. So I think there are some interesting constellations where they want to piece together a roster. And also now with the new meta coming in, Sombra is definitely one question. Like, I think you need definitely more than one Sombra player because it's quite likely that you can't play Sombra on attack and defense on every map. So you need someone that plays Sombra and Axe, right? And then on the other map, you need Sombra and Axe. So depending on that, you might switch them in. And I think also, from what I understand, Silk Thread is also one of those guys that you can definitely hire for personality reasons. He seems... So if we're going back to Dominoes, now on a social aspect, he slots in everywhere, right? He made some, minor comments on social media out of frustration of not being played. But otherwise, it has been pretty quiet around him. Now, we obviously don't know what it was inside the Valiant, but also historically, Silk Thread was more like a guy that kept to himself for the most part, if we think about back way in the day. So I think that's just a very good system player that probably has to be considered within single digits of performances in comparison to Hydration. If you can then specialize that player and add a new facet to his gameplay that Hydration doesn't have, but you definitely need in your map pool. So, for instance, Junkrat comes to mind, which will definitely be resurrected because of Junkertown now being in the pool. And we don't know what Blizzard World will look like, but I don't know, could be, right? So, depending on that, yeah, I think it's not a stupid pickup, or because it looks like he's like a Hydration, but I think if you can customize that, it makes sense.
Not to go off on a huge tangent, but I think it's actually quite similar, and I love the point that you make where you talk about the overlap and how it's actually kind of necessary. I mean, look at Philadelphia Fusion in the finals. You have Snillo and you have Carpe. It's like, yeah, they share similar hero pools, but bringing in Snillo kind of frees up Carpe to do what he wants. So I think that's definitely spot on.
And it also gave them the opportunity to even have map specialists for certain, because Snillo for the most part was their Route 66 tracer, and that's largely in part of they wanted Carpe to to be able to move around on it, the Widowmaker, but it was also in the fact that there's strategic aspects of how you might play tracer deeper on a map when you're focusing your tracer on that hero. So that's interesting. I mean, I think overall this can't be bad for the Gladiators, right? At the end of the day, it gives them more flexibility. They definitely, with 4 DPS, can make it a little bit maybe easier for internal scrims and things like that. You might even see some. You might see them try to pair up their DPS. It's going to be interesting. Now, the other team that saw a bunch of movement, is it the same team anymore, is the LA Valiant. So the first one is Envy, the off-tank for the Valiant, has been released. And they say it was a mutual decision, so it doesn't sound like there was a whole lot of contract disputes and stuff. And I mean, when you're in a contract, it's pretty difficult to get out unless you're breaking the rules, right? So the new tank line is likely going to be Fate in Space, who just turned 18 last week. Volamel, do you think that this is an upgrade on their tank line long term, or are you kind of worried? A lot of people were big fans of Envy and considered him to be one of the best in the off-tank roles, despite kind of taking a dip towards the end of stage 2.
Definitely. It is kind of a sad departure for Envy. I think that he was one of the, if not the most improved player coming out of contenders for that Immortals roster. I remember, I think we all remember his famous Ilios games where he just really did not shine. And now he actually was a very shining example of what growth looks like and a nice focal point for that Valiant roster. So it is sad to see him go. Obviously, we really don't know why. We can speculate on why, but overall, we've seen Space in the past. He looks like a great talent overall. He's young, so he's going to be able to grow similarly to how Envy did previously, hopefully. But overall, it's tough to say right now, at least for me. It's been a long time since I've seen Space play, but from what I remember, I think he's a nice fit. But we'll have to see how the synergy plays out in stage 3. Obviously, new meta, basically a new team. We'll see if there's any kind of a learning curve there with the team and see if they have any problems to iron out early on.
Well, a lot of the Overwatch League players seem to be really hyped up on Space as a player from recent times. So even if we haven't seen him a whole lot, the general professional community is like, yeah, this is going to be a great move. What do you think, Yiska? Like, how is Space, do you think, going to slide in and fit in? Obviously, he's going to be picking up that diva role for the better part of it, unless they throw some sort of curveball at us. But how else does he fit into the LA Valiant here?
Yeah, so I think the problem we have when evaluating Space is that the last footage we've really seen of him is on the old diva. And Huyal has already shown us that it's an uphill battle for some player types to acclimate to that. Because Matrix management, for instance, is quite hard. The micro missiles or micro rockets or whatever aren't trivial to maximize damage off. So it's hard to judge him by that. What I can say, though, is that when he played in Contenders EU, I talked to a bunch of his teammates. He was on Cloud9 EU back then, and they were all singing high praises of Space. He has 4D vision or whatever, very good situational awareness. I mean, it remains to be seen if this transitions. But he has big shoes to fill. I think in general, Envy was probably a top 5 diva in the league, if I had to evaluate that. And then pair that with the Korean synergy with Fate, and now you have, a task ahead of you if you're Space. So we'll see how this develops, but he's one of the exciting, American young 18-year-old players that are coming in, much like a Super, for instance. And it might just work.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. One thing I do like about this is I think we might see a little bit more Zarya out of the Valiant. We didn't see a whole lot of Zarya, and it was usually Kariv. They would run triple tank on King's Row or control center on Lijiang Tower to some success, but that also is going to kind of free them up to be able to do that, because that was something that Envy didn't really do, is he didn't really have a Zarya in his arsenal. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of see if we see more Zarya, if we only see it in triple tank. But I'm not sure that we always want to see Zarya with triple tank. So especially with the new meta coming up.
And if it's played in triple tank, it's quite likely that the tracking, the tracer player or whatever will pick up the Zarya instead, because it's sort of similar at least in the aim department. And if we just look at historically who picks up in triple tank that role, it's usually the tracer player. So, for instance, Prophet does it for London, or who else? Sinatra does it, right? So
right,
Effect.
Yep,
Effect, yeah.
Let's talk about the other kind of big one. I think honestly, this one might have surprised me the most of the trades that we saw. And that's that Custa and Unco have switched. So we're seeing Custa coming over to the Valiant. We're seeing Unco go to the Fuel. Volamel, what does Custa bring to the Valiant that they don't already have, or that Unco maybe wasn't offering them in their playstyle?
Well, one of the large kind of factors that we've seen ponied around for Custa is that he's a very vocal player, and he's very vocal in communication. And through the breakdowns and the listen-ins that we've seen, he is very, very vocal. Coupled that with, actually quite a talented English-speaking support player, I think it's a great pickup overall. If they're lacking some sort of in-game leadership, something that maybe Verbo that was supposed to bring, and now that they're not necessarily playing him all the time, they need someone else that they can play, that other half with. So I think that's something that Custa brings that maybe Unco was a little bit more quiet, a little bit more reserved, and obviously you had the trilingual synergy issues where you have to translate into Korean into French and then back and forth. So I'm sure it wasn't very fun to try and communicate within that team. So trying to funnel that down as best as you can probably is for the best, especially if you're looking long term. But overall, having somebody in there to call the shots, maybe has a great in-game sense. Alt tracking could be really spot on. It's hard to say exactly what he does in terms of communication, but I think that's one of the intangibles that he brings, perhaps over Unco.
And they said, I believe Custa said on his stream that currently right now he won't be playing. Was it Zen? He's not going to be playing. So
that makes sense. So.
Yeah, so we're going to see that. What about on the fuel side, Yiska? Like, what do we think? What do you think about Unco on the fuel?
So the first thing you have to say is bringing Unco in, to me, seems like a message that they don't have confidence in Chip Science Zen anymore. Otherwise, you would have probably him around for the most part. And it's also, Chip Science was in a pretty strange position because he had to pick up the Mercy slack, and then in stage 1, because nobody wanted to play it. And then he now had to transition into a full-time Zen role. There was this weird switch around. Once again, like these domino pieces keep changing up from stage to stage. So currently it's like you lose your player to play the Ana and to an extent also the Mercy. And then you want your Zen, or you did want your Zen. We're not sure how that will develop in stage 3. But you want your Zen to be almost like a one-trick, right? So a Jonak probably loses a fair bit if he has to flex a lot, right? Zen was almost like the Tracer role, where you want people to focus on that one character 80% of the time, let's say, and then see what happens now. The thing is, with Unco, he's a pretty good flex support in Zenyatta. I don't believe he's a world-class Zenyatta anymore, and he hasn't shown that for a while. In general, the old flex gods have fallen quite a bit. If you think about Jaehong, if you think about Unco, if you think about Chips, these were like around the Apex time, so like Apex Season 1, Apex Season 2, possibly Apex Season 3. These were gods, and now they look nothing like Bedosin and even a Neko or whatever, right? So, or Jonek. Yes. Unco coming in is... I specifically remember watching Unco at TakeOver 2 because I was very interested in how much he actually calls. And it's not a lot. I can tell you that. So I obviously don't speak French, or not good, and I don't lip read French. But it seemed like he only did maybe target calling in the sense where his orb is, or called for when he needed help. So he's definitely not a maestro that delegates play. Now, that was what Costa was doing, right?
Right.
So the other thing that is implied by this trade is that Harry Hook comes back into the roster more full-time. And I wonder how that will go, because I think I remember that Harry was doing a lot of the ult tracking and calling that. And to incorporate him into the roster and then having Unco, I'm not sure if there's such a thing as flex support and DPS synergy as much. So I don't know how much boost you get from having the AKM Unco synergy there. But yeah, in general, I must say, even though I'm a fan of Unco, that I'm not sure that this solves anything for Valiant.
That's kind of what I get the feeling of. Is I feel like the Valiant come out a little bit ahead here. We know a lot about Custa, his kind of veteran presence. Mickey said on his stream that he was a real leader in staple in the Dallas fuel for what was going well. So that should say.
Not to jump off that topic real fast. I did want to touch on one last thing. It was like Dallas's lack of leadership there, where Custa is leaving, and we did see some back and forth. I think it was between Slasher and Kai Kai, or maybe it was Monty and Kai Kai. And Kai Kai mentioned that OGE is going to be the kind of new leader that comes in, but there again, he's going to be absent, I believe, the first 2 weeks because of his 4-game suspension. So again, you're bringing in a Korean to lead a team of semi-Koreans, what's happening with Rascal, what's happening with Effect, nobody really knows. It doesn't scream cohesive at all. And again, I think that's been Dallas Fuel's biggest problem. I don't think they've been hurting for talent. Yes, Unko is a talent, but I don't think they necessarily need someone who's talented. I think they need someone who's actually going to structure the team and actually guide them in a direction, because they don't seem to have one, or at least, from my opinion, they don't seem to have one.
It'll be really interesting to see. There's one more thing I want to talk about with you guys, and that is Bunny. We saw Bunny get signed to the Dallas Fuel from the Seoul Dynasty. And, sorry, not the Fuel. Sorry, the Valiant. Yeah, the Valiant. Obviously, Soon is currently kind of the resident tracer on that roster. So my question is going to be a pretty obvious one, is how does a team function with two tracers? Because we've seen teams have two tracer players, and one doesn't really get a whole lot of play, and the other one does. But there are also some very stark differences in tracer play styles between Soon, largely seen as one of the most kind of calculated and conservative tracers in the league. You see a lot less deaths out of a guy like Soon than you do like Bunny, who is a little bit more on the aggressive side. So Yiska, I mean, what do you think about this? Is this something that can make that can improve the Valiant? Do you think that they're going to try and change how Soon operates within the Valiant?
Maybe. The thing is that even though when we think of Soon, we think of Tracer, he also played a bunch of other heroes.
Definitely
if I recall correctly. So he was, I believe, a good chunk of Junkrat was played by him. I think
so. Yeah.
Like even in the Rogue days, he played that. So it's weird, and I remember it being phenomenal back then. Now, obviously, this is Overwatch League standard. It's not the same, right? But Junkrat will be a thing that is required, as I said before. But yeah, like maybe that's one of those things where you need two tracer specialists in the same sense that Fusion needed Carpe and Snillo, right? So they can play both at the same time. Now, at the same time, you have to say that if we give merit to the rumors, then Bunny was possibly signed in the belief that they would get rid of Soon. And that also makes sense. And I'm not sure which one makes more sense, which scenario, but I think they can make it work, let's say that. So I think signing Bunny didn't really cause any problems, and if anything, I think certain type of players can thrive under inner team competition. So if you now have to fight for your starting spots, that might elevate your play in some sense, or your not even your practice, but really your attitude. Right? So we'll see how that goes.
I think one of the interesting lenses that I'm looking at with the Valiant right now too is Sombra. Who plays Sombra and who gets the time on Sombra? Because right now, if you go and look at these players' hero pools, I think you had Kareev play Sombra way back in the day with I'm going way back here. What Immortals?
Like, during Contenders.
Yeah. So, besides, who plays the Sombra role in something a lot of people believe that we're going to see a lot more Sombra with the new changes. So maybe that there's a plan there. Maybe Bunny has a Sombra, or maybe who knows?
If I remember correctly, I think Soon actually played a little bit of Sombra back. I want to recall like a Hanamura and Apex that they ran Sombra hacking the side health packs. So I think that's going to be something that they could definitely flex to. I think it lends itself kind of fundamentally, the movement. It's a high octane kind of similar gun spread. Obviously not the same hero, but like if you synthesize it down to the most basic level, I think that Soon definitely could flex over there to where Bunny. We haven't really seen him off of Tracer since his, integration into Overwatch. Even during BK Stars, he only played Tracer, so I don't see him flexing. But if there was going to be someone, it probably would be soon that. And also, I'm surprised Yiska doesn't mention this, but Fate, and now they have Bunny. They have two Korean kind of duo players. Hopefully, they can maybe are on the same wavelength. Maybe communication between them might be a little bit easier. But again, those are going to be the biggest duo in Overwatch right now is the Winston and the Tracer. So making it a more cohesive and precise dive, I would say, is going to be really important. And roping in soon into that kind of duo to make it a trio is going to be really important, I believe. So I would say those kind of ideas are pretty important.
Well, we are about at time. It's Overwatch League. We do this. We're really good at doing this. We just go and go. But Stage 3 starts today. Happy Stage 3, guys. I look forward to watching Overwatch League with you, as we always do. Sit in there, talk, make meme jokes, and have a good time. Thanks again for joining me, and we'll be back with you guys soon. I am sure of it. My thanks to Yiska and Volamel for joining me on the show today. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at YiskaOut and at Volamel. Tomorrow I'm going to be joined by Overwatch caster for the Australia region, Pixie. We're going to discuss tonight's matches. And also don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of Overwatch League Daily. And of course, if you have questions or comments for the show, email me at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com or tweet me at OWLDailyShow. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Overwatch League Daily. We'll see you next time.